March 12th. I used to think the worst thing my sister could do was stop returning my calls. I was wrong. The worst thing was hearing her whisper my name at the top of the stairs. Close enough that I felt the warmth of her breath, and realizing too late that she wasn't asking a question. She was delivering a verdict. The stairwell lights were dim, the kind that always flickered before the building manager replaced them. I had one hand on the railing, my purse sliding down my shoulder, when Jordan stepped into my path. My younger sister, 22, soft-spoken when other people were around, sharp when they weren't. She leaned in, her voice low, almost careful. "You went behind my back," she said. "You talked to someone about Grandpa's will." I didn't answer right away. I was still trying to understand how she knew. The accusation wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. That made it worse. It sounded rehearsed, like something she'd been carrying for a while. "I didn't do anything to you," I said. I took a half step back, more out of instinct than fear. "Jordan, move. Let me pass." Her hands came up fast. They hit my chest hard enough to knock the air out of me. My heels slipped on the edge of the top step, and the world tilted. I remember the sound before I remember the pain, the hollow thud of my body hitting wood, then another, then another. The railing cracked against my shoulder. My head struck the lower landing and the light exploded behind my eyes. I lay there stunned, my cheek pressed to the cold floor. Something warm spread through my hair. I tried to move my fingers and couldn't tell if they obeyed. Jordan stood at the top of the stairs, framed by shadow. She didn't rush down. She didn't scream for help. She looked almost calm, like someone watching a scene resolve the way she expected it to. "No one's going to believe you," she said. Her voice was steady now, certain. "Mom already knows what you are." I wanted to speak. I wanted to say her name again the way I had when we were kids, and she used to listen. But my mouth wouldn't work. The building was quiet, too quiet for a place with 3 apartments and thin walls. Somewhere outside, a car passed, tires hissing on pavement. Life going on. The front door at the bottom of the stairwell opened and closed. I don't know if Jordan heard it. I don't know if she cared. She took a step back, then another, and disappeared down the hallway above me. I lay there staring at the underside of the stairs, trying to hold on to one clear thought. Not about the pain, not about the blood, about the way she'd said it. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "it was an accident," but "no one will believe you." That was when I understood this wasn't just about a fall. It was about a story that had already been written for me, and the fact that I was bleeding at the bottom of the stairs didn't change it at all. The last thing I remember is the light flickering once more, then going dark. Wednesday, March 13th. I woke up to the steady beep of a monitor and the taste of metal in my mouth. For a few seconds I couldn't remember where I was. Then the ache in my shoulder and the tight bandage around my head brought everything back at once. The stairs, the whisper, Jordan's hands. A nurse noticed my eyes open and came over, calm and efficient. She told me my name, where I was, and asked if I knew what day it was. I did. That felt like a small victory. She checked my pupils, my blood pressure, then told me a doctor would be in soon. My phone was on the tray table beside the bed. I hadn't turned it on yet, but I could already see the screen light up again and again. Missed calls, messages, family group texts, piling on top of each other, like they were trying to bury something. When I finally picked it up, the first message I read wasn't, "Are you okay?" It was from my mother. "What happened last night was an accident. Let's all calm down." That was how Denise Waller handled crises. She named them before anyone else could, then acted as if the naming itself settled the matter. An accident, a misunderstanding, nothing to see here. The doctor came in not long after. He was in his 40s, serious but not unkind. He explained my injuries carefully: concussion, bruising, a cracked shoulder blade. When he finished, he paused. "These injuries aren't typical of a simple slip," he said. "I'm required to document that." I nodded. My head throbbed when I did, but I nodded anyway. I didn't ask him to say it louder. I didn't ask him to write it in bold. I had spent most of my life learning how to take information like that quietly. Later that morning, a police officer came by to take a preliminary statement. He was polite, almost apologetic, like he didn't want to intrude. I told him what happened without embellishment. The whisper, the shove, what Jordan said afterward. He listened, wrote things down, thanked me, and said someone would follow up. By the time he left, my phone was buzzing again. Jordan had texted, "I can't believe you're letting this get out of hand. You know I didn't mean to hurt you." Below that, another message, this one clearly written with an audience in mind. "We're family, we should handle this privately." That word privately had always been code in our house. It meant quietly. It meant without witnesses. It meant the version of events my mother was already preparing. Growing up, Jordan was the one who needed protection. That was the story. She was sensitive, emotional, easily overwhelmed. I was the strong one. The one who could take a joke, take criticism, take responsibility. When something went wrong, I was expected to absorb it and keep moving. Nothing illustrated that better than what was happening now. By early afternoon, Denise arrived at the hospital with a practiced look of concern. She touched my arm gently, avoiding the bandages. "Sweetheart," she said, "we're all so worried." She talked without stopping, about how shaken Jordan was, about how terrible it was that strangers were getting involved, about my grandfather whose health had been declining for months, and he didn't need this kind of stress. That was the real fault line beneath everything. Grandpa's house, his savings, the documents Denise managed, and Jordan insisted she understood better than I ever could. Weeks earlier, I had quietly spoken to a probate attorney because something felt wrong. I hadn't accused anyone. I had asked questions. Somehow Jordan knew. "I didn't do this to hurt you," Denise said, her voice firming just enough to sound reasonable. "But we can't let a misunderstanding tear this family apart." I looked at her and realized she had already decided how this would end. Not with the truth, with containment. When she left, I lay back against the pillow and stared at the ceiling. The beeping monitor filled the room again. Outside my door, nurses moved on to the next patient, the next emergency. I hadn't done anything yet. I hadn't pushed back. I hadn't accused anyone of anything out loud. But the story was already moving without me. Thursday, March 14th. I was discharged just before noon with instructions I barely listened to, and a folder of papers I didn't open. A friend drove me home because I wasn't supposed to be alone, and because the doctor had been clear about one thing: no stairs unless absolutely necessary. That felt like a cruel joke considering where I lived. The building looked the same as it always had. Red brick, narrow windows, a shared stairwell that smelled faintly of cleaning solution and old wood. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment longer than I needed to, staring up at the second-floor landing, trying to decide whether I felt angry or afraid. It was easier not to choose. Inside the stairwell, lights hummed softly. I took the steps slowly, one at a time, my hand tight on the railing. The spot where I'd hit my head had already been cleaned, but I knew exactly where it was. Some knowledge doesn't leave just because the evidence does. I was unlocking my door when I felt someone behind me. I turned, my heart jumping, and saw a woman I recognized, but had never really spoken to. She was in her early 60s, maybe a little older, with short gray hair and sensible shoes. She lived on the second floor across from the stairs. I knew that much because I'd seen her carrying groceries up at the same time every Saturday morning for years. "Claire," she said, using my name like it wasn't a guess. "I'm Marlene Bishop." I nodded, my head protested. "Hi." She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't say she was sorry. She glanced once at the stairwell, then back at me. "My camera faces the landing," she said. For a second I thought I'd misunderstood her, or that she'd misunderstood me. People don't usually lead with information like that. They work their way toward it. I installed it last winter, she went on matter of fact. After someone tried to get into my apartment and packages started disappearing. It records video all the time, audio sometimes. The words settled slowly, camera, landing, records all the time. I felt something shift in my chest. Not relief exactly, and not hope. More like the first crack in a wall I'd assumed was solid. I don't want to get involved in family business, Marlene said, but I don't gossip. And I don't erase things unless I'm supposed to. I believed her. Not because she sounded righteous, but because she sounded practical. Like someone who had spent her life filing things correctly and sleeping better for it. I haven't shown it to anyone, she added. The police came by yesterday, but they didn't ask about cameras. Not yet. I thought of my mother's voice. Accident. I thought of Jordan's text messages. Handle this privately. I imagined what would happen if either of them knew what Marlene had just told me. Please don't say anything yet, I said. It came out quieter than I meant it to. Not until someone official asks. Marlene nodded once. That's what I figured. She hesitated, then reached into her pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper. Her phone number written neatly in blue ink. If anyone pressures you, she said, or me, call the police. Or call me, in that order. After she left, I locked my door and leaned my forehead against it. The apartment felt different, smaller somehow, but safer. I sat on the edge of the couch and let myself breathe for the first time since the hospital. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. The officer said they might need to come back. Just stick to what we discussed. I didn't reply. I set the phone face down on the table and looked at the quiet room around me. The hum of the refrigerator. The ticking clock above the sink. Ordinary sounds. Somewhere in this building, a small camera had been watching without caring who anyone was supposed to believe. For the first time since the fall, I understood that the story might not belong to my family alone. Friday, March 15th. The police came back in the early afternoon when the building was quiet, and most people were at work. I knew they were coming because my mother had texted me an hour earlier, as if she'd been given advance notice. They'll probably stop by today. Just remember what we talked about. I didn't respond. I set the phone on the counter and waited, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sounds of traffic outside. When the knock came, it was firm but not aggressive. Procedure, not urgency. 2 officers stood in the hallway when I opened the door. One of them was the same man who had spoken to me at the hospital. The other was a woman a little older with a notebook already in her hand. They introduced themselves, asked if they could come in, and looked briefly around the living room before taking a seat. They hadn't even opened their notebooks yet when my mother appeared behind them. I hope I'm not late, Denise said, stepping inside like she belonged there. I'm Claire's mother. She didn't wait to be invited. She took the chair closest to me, close enough that I could smell her perfume. It was the same one she'd worn for years, and there is a detail that felt oddly deliberate. The female officer asked me to describe what happened again. I took a breath and started from the beginning. The landing, the whisper, the shove. I kept my voice steady, even when my hands didn't cooperate. Halfway through, my mother leaned forward. She's always been clumsy, Denise said lightly, rushing around, not paying attention. Jordan tried to grab her, but she lost her balance. The officer glanced up. Ma'am, we'll need to hear from your daughter directly. Of course, my mother said. I just want to help clarify. Clarify. Another word that meant something different in our family. I finished my account. I included what Jordan said after I fell. The line about no one believing me. The officer wrote that down carefully. Has there been any ongoing conflict between you and your sister? The woman asked. Yes, my mother answered before I could. About family matters, stressful ones. I felt something tighten in my chest. This was how it worked. She didn't deny what happened. She reframed it. shifted the weight until it landed somewhere safer for everyone else. The officers asked a few more questions, then explained that they would need to follow up. They mentioned neighbors, cameras, building security. At that, my mother's posture changed just slightly. Not enough to draw attention, but enough that I noticed. She smiled too quickly. "This is a small building," she said. "Everyone knows everyone. People talk." The female officer closed her notebook. "We'll be thorough." After they left, my mother stayed. She stood by the window looking out at the street, her arms crossed. "You didn't need to mention the whisper," she said quietly. "That just makes everything sound worse." "It happened," I said. She turned to me, then her expression firm. "Claire, you need to think about the consequences. Jordan is already fragile. Your grandfather doesn't need more stress. And once something like this gets on record, you can't take it back." That was the pressure. Not shouted, not dramatic, just steady and relentless. "I'm just asking you to be careful," she added. "People will draw their own conclusions." After she left, the apartment felt heavy. I locked the door and leaned against it, my head throbbing. I hadn't confronted anyone. I hadn't accused my mother of lying, or my sister of planning anything. But I could feel it now, the narrowing space, the way the story was being shaped around me, tightening with every conversation. Whatever was coming next, I knew one thing for certain. If the truth didn't surface soon, the version they were selling would be the only one left. Monday, March 18th. The detective asked if I was sure before she pressed play. We were sitting at a small table in a windowless interview room at the precinct, the kind designed to keep emotions contained. The walls were beige, the chairs were metal. Everything about the space suggested order and restraint, as if chaos could be managed by fluorescent lights and careful procedures. Marlene sat beside me, her hands folded in her lap. She hadn't spoken much since we arrived. She didn't look nervous. She looked resolved. The screen flickered on. At first there was nothing remarkable. The empty stairwell, the hum of the lights. Then the door at the top of the stairs opened and I saw myself step onto the landing, purse and my shoulder keys in my hand. A few seconds later, Jordan appeared. I hadn't realized how close she'd stood to me until I saw it from the outside. How she angled her body to block the stairs. How her head dipped toward mine. There was no sound at that moment, but I knew what she was saying. I could feel it again in my chest. The detective leaned forward when Jordan's hands came up. She paused the video right there. Jordan's palms were flat against me. My weight was already shifting backward. There was no stumble, no misstep, just force. The rest happened quickly. My body disappeared down the stairs. The camera caught the impact at the bottom. It caught Jordan standing still at the top, looking down. No one in the room spoke until the detective stopped the recording. "That's not a fall," she said quietly. Something inside me loosened, then not in relief, but in recognition. The truth didn't feel dramatic. It felt plain, almost dull in its certainty. The detective explained the next steps. The footage would be logged as evidence. A formal report would be updated. Charges would be reviewed by the prosecutor. It would take time. Nothing would happen overnight. I nodded. Time, I understood. I had lived inside silence for years. "What happens now?" I asked. "If I decide to go forward." She met my eyes. "Then it's no longer just a family matter." That was the moment I crossed a line. I couldn't uncross. I thought of my mother's voice telling me to be careful. Of Jordan's text messages asking me to keep things private. Of how easily the word accident had been offered up to cover what I now saw clearly on the screen. "I want to go forward," I said. Marlene's hand tightened briefly around her own fingers, a small controlled movement. She didn't look at me, but I felt her steadiness beside me. After we finished, the detective walked us out. In the hallway, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother sent 10 minutes earlier. They said the officers came by again. You didn't tell them anything unnecessary, did you? I didn't answer. I slipped the phone into my bag and stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of what I'd just done settle into place. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even confrontation. It was the end of pretending that silence was protecting anyone. As Marlene and I stepped out into the cold afternoon, I knew there would be consequences. For Jordan, for my mother, for me. But for the first time since the night on the stairs, the story no longer belonged to them. Tuesday, March 19th. By morning, the decision I had made the day before felt heavier, not lighter. It settled into my body. The way pain does after the shock wears off, dull, constant, impossible to ignore. I spent the early hours sitting at my kitchen table staring at the stack of papers the detective had given me. Instructions, numbers to call, a timeline that no longer belonged to me. Outside the city moved through an ordinary workday. Buses stopped and started. Someone laughed on the sidewalk. The normalcy felt almost offensive. When I called the number for the victim's advocate, my hand shook. She introduced herself as Linda, spoke calmly, and told me what pressing charges would mean in practical terms. Court dates, protective orders, the possibility that my sister would be arrested, the likelihood that my mother would blame me for every consequence that followed. None of it sounded abstract. It sounded exact. I said yes anyway. By late morning, my phone had become unusable. Calls went unanswered. Text messages stacked up, each one sharper than the last. An aunt asking if I had lost perspective. A cousin reminding me that family sticks together. My mother left a voicemail that I didn't delete but couldn't bring myself to listen to yet. I did one more thing that day. Something I had avoided for weeks because I knew what it would mean. I called Adult Protective Services. I didn't accuse. I didn't dramatize. I described what I knew about my grandfather's situation. His declining health. My mother's control over his appointments and mail. The sudden urgency around changing documents. The woman on the line asked careful questions and told me they would assess whether a welfare check was appropriate. When I hung up, I sat very still. That call felt different from the others. It wasn't about what had been done to me. It was about what might still be happening to someone who couldn't speak as easily. The retaliation came faster than I expected. Jordan sent a message from an unknown number. She said I was destroying her life. That I had taken something too far. That I was proving everything our mother had ever said about me. My mother followed with a longer email. It wasn't angry. It was wounded. She wrote about sacrifice. About how much she had given up. About how disappointed she was that I would involve strangers instead of trusting her to handle things. There was no mention of the stairs. No mention of the shove. Just consequences framed as betrayal. By the afternoon, I knew I couldn't stay in my apartment. Not because I was afraid of them showing up, but because the walls themselves felt like witnesses. Every creak in the stairwell sent my heart racing. Every sound outside my door felt like a test. A friend offered her spare room. I packed a small bag, clothes, medication, the folder of paperwork, and left my keys on the counter. As I closed the door behind me, I understood something with surprising clarity. This wasn't about winning, or punishing, or proving I was right. It was about refusing to carry what wasn't mine anymore. I didn't know what Jordan would do next, or how my mother would escalate once she realized silence wasn't an option. I only knew that I had crossed into a place where going back was impossible. And for the first time, that didn't feel like loss. Wednesday, March 20th, I found out my sister had been arrested from a voicemail left by my employer. They didn't use the word arrest. They said there had been a situation involving a member of my immediate family, and that given my role and the nature of my work, they needed to know whether I would be available later that week. It was careful language, corporate language, the kind that pretends neutrality while quietly calculating risk. By the time I called back, the news had already moved faster than I had. Jordan had been taken in the night before for processing and released a few hours later, under a temporary no-contact order. The charge was assault. The words looked unreal on the screen when I finally saw them in writing. Not because they were wrong, but because I had spent my entire life believing they would never be applied to someone like her. The victim's advocate called to explain what the order meant. Jordan was not allowed to contact me directly or indirectly. She couldn't come near my apartment, my workplace, or the address where I was staying. Any violation would be documented. Protection came with its own kind of exposure. My mother reacted the only way she knew how, by trying to regain control. She showed up unannounced at my friend's apartment that afternoon. I didn't answer the door, but I heard her voice through the hallway walls, sharp and contained, asking to speak with me as a mother. When my friend told her I wasn't available, Denise left without raising her voice. An hour later, I received an email addressed not just to me, but to several relatives and 2 people from my workplace. It framed the situation as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. It described Jordan as fragile, overwhelmed, pushed beyond reason. It implied I was vindictive, unstable, that I had always been jealous. It didn't mention the video. That omission told me everything. The detective assigned to my case called later that day. She said Jordan's attorney was already signaling an aggressive defense. They were questioning Marlene's credibility, suggesting the footage was misleading, claiming context had been lost. Be prepared for things to get uncomfortable, the detective said. This is the point where people start trying to rewrite the record. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach tightened. I worried about my job, about my reputation, about whether telling the truth would cost me more than I could afford to lose. The next morning, I learned that Adult Protective Services had conducted a welfare check on my grandfather. He was safe, confused but safe. The caseworker had documented concerns and scheduled follow-ups. That information didn't bring relief. It brought escalation. My mother sent a final message, this one directly to me. You have no idea what you started. This will hurt people you claim to love. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I forwarded the message to the detective and blocked the number. I understood then that this phase wasn't about proving anything new. The truth was already on record. This phase was about endurance. The system had taken the wheel, and no one, least of all my family, could steer it back to where it had been. I didn't know how it would end. I only knew it wouldn't be quiet. Thursday, March 21st. The meeting wasn't my idea. That was the first thing I told myself as I sat in the conference room at the county building, hands folded, waiting. It had been proposed by Jordan's attorney and approved by the prosecutor, limited, supervised, no direct contact outside what was allowed. Not reconciliation, not negotiation, clarification. I agreed because running hadn't protected me before. The room was plain and overly warm, furnished with a long table and chairs that scraped loudly against the floor. A recorder sat in the middle, red light off for now. On my side sat the prosecutor and a clerk. Across from me, Jordan entered with her attorney, eyes down, shoulders drawn inward like she was trying to make herself smaller. My mother arrived last. Denise took her seat without looking at me, her posture rigid, hands clasped. She looked composed, even dignified, and I recognized the strategy immediately. Calm implied credibility. Calm suggested innocence. The prosecutor laid out the purpose of the meeting. Facts would be reviewed, statements clarified, nothing decided today. Jordan spoke first. Her voice was quiet, trembling in places, as she described stress, confusion, fear. She said she believed I was trying to take something from her, that she felt cornered. She didn't say the word push. She didn't have to. Everyone knew what we were there for. When it was my turn, I kept my eyes on the table. I didn't hide anything I said. I asked questions, privately, because things didn't feel right. Denise exhaled sharply, just enough to be noticed. "This has gone far enough," she said. "My daughters are being torn apart over assumptions." The prosecutor asked about the email Denise had sent to my workplace, about the unannounced visit to my friend's apartment, about the message she sent after the welfare check. Denise stiffened. I was trying to protect my family from what the prosecutor asked. The question hung in the air. Jordan's attorney tried to redirect, suggesting that the video lacked context, that family dynamics were complicated, that my report to Adult Protective Services had escalated tensions unnecessarily. That was when something clicked. I realized I had been trying to defend myself against a narrative that wasn't actually the most dangerous one. The real issue wasn't whether Jordan had lost control in a moment of fear. It was why that fear had been cultivated so carefully, and who benefited from it. I looked up then, meeting my mother's eyes for the first time. "I didn't call a PS to punish anyone," I said. "I called because Grandpa couldn't speak for himself. And because someone needed to check." Denise opened her mouth, then closed it. The clerk turned on the recorder. What followed wasn't a confession. It wasn't a collapse. It was something quieter and more revealing. Denise minimized, deflected, corrected details that hadn't been disputed. She spoke at length about intentions, not outcomes. By the end of the meeting, nothing was resolved. But something had shifted. Outside, the prosecutor walked with me down the hallway. "You did the right thing," she said. "And you should know this helped." I didn't feel victorious. I felt steadier. The confrontation hadn't ended the conflict. It had clarified it. The lines were drawn now, not in anger, but in record and procedure. For the first time since this began, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing my next move. Monday, April 8th. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No raised voices, no drama. Just wood benches worn smooth by decades of use, and a judge who had clearly seen families like mine before. I sat behind the prosecutor, hands folded in my lap, staring straight ahead. Jordan sat at the defense table, her shoulders tense, her lawyer murmuring occasionally into her ear. She looked different now, not fragile, exposed. The judge reviewed the case in a measured voice. The footage, the medical report, the no-contact violations narrowly avoided, the attempts to discredit a civilian witness. Each item was treated with the same weight, the same calm seriousness. When the judge addressed Jordan directly, the room felt very still. She accepted a plea: assault, probation instead of jail time, mandatory counseling and anger management treatment, restitution for my medical expenses, a multi-year restraining order that would become permanent if violated. There was no apology. There didn't need to be. The record spoke for itself. Then my mother's name was called. Denise did not sit at the defense table, but her presence was unmistakable. The prosecutor outlined her actions carefully: interference, intimidation, attempts to shape testimony, and misuse of access in matters involving an elderly family member. Not violence, something colder. Her attorney argued intent. The judge focused on impact. The outcome was firm and restrained. Court-ordered probation, financial penalties, mandatory counseling, and a permanent public record tied to her name. I watched my mother's face as the words ran. Not shock, not remorse. Something closer to disbelief. As if she had truly believed that consequences were for other people. When it was over, the judge looked at me. "You did the right thing bringing this forward," she said. "The court recognizes the difficulty of pursuing accountability within a family." I nodded. My throat was tight, but I didn't cry. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, but the prosecutor guided me past them. In the quiet hallway, I leaned against the wall and let the adrenaline drain away. This wasn't victory. It was finality. Jordan's life would not collapse overnight, but it would not look the same again. My mother's reputation, so carefully curated, now carried a permanent asterisk. The grandfather's affairs were placed under oversight, where secrecy no longer thrived. Everything had a cost. As I walked down the courthouse steps alone, I felt the weight of the last few weeks settle fully into place. The truth had been recorded. Not just spoken, not just believed, but documented. It would follow all of us from now on. And for the first time, that didn't feel like a threat. Tuesday, April 9th. The morning after the hearing, I woke up without the familiar knot in my chest. It wasn't relief exactly, more like space. The kind you don't notice until it's been missing for a long time. I stayed where I was for a few weeks, letting the dust settle. My apartment was still there, unchanged, but I wasn't ready to go back yet. Healing, I learned, wasn't about returning to old rooms and pretending they felt the same. The restraining order was finalized and delivered. The probation terms were in place. Adult Protective Services established ongoing oversight for my grandfather. Everything that could be documented had been documented. The system had finished its work. What it hadn't done was tell me how to feel. I didn't miss my sister. I missed the idea of a sister. I didn't ache for my mother's approval anymore, but I noticed the quiet where it used to be. There was grief in that, and I let it exist without trying to fix it. When I finally returned to my apartment, the stairwell felt different. Not safer, just honest. The lights still flickered, the wood still creaked, but the silence no longer felt like a threat. I ran into Marlene one afternoon as she was carrying in groceries. She nodded like neighbors do and asked if I was settling back in. Nothing more, nothing intrusive. It was the kind of respect that had been missing from my life for years. At work, things stabilized. The questions stopped. My name stopped circulating as a warning. I learned who watched and who stayed quiet, and I adjusted my expectations accordingly. I thought forgiveness would arrive someday like a finish line. Instead, what came was clarity. I understood what belonged to me and what didn't, what I was responsible for, and what I never had been. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the window open, listening to the city slow down. I took out a notebook and wrote a single sentence, then another. I am allowed to be safe. I am allowed to tell the truth. I am allowed to walk away. Those were not affirmations. They were boundaries. Justice hadn't given me back a family. It had given me something quieter and more durable, myself. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you define justice when it comes to family, and what has healing looked like for you? If you want to follow more stories like this, feel free to subscribe and join me